All right. Everyone, if you would like to please turn in your folders, we're going to be using document number 11 for this presentation. That is the slides that are being shown, but you may also want to take your own notes on the slides as we go along. I want to say one clarifying thing to you about a document that is in your packet. That's document number 13, the colored bar graphs. There's no need to take it out, but I do want to tell you, you do not have the same documents. That's why we so carefully registered you and needed to know who you are. All of you should have a Diocese of Utah graph. And then you should have your own congregation's graph. If you got somebody else's packet, you got somebody else's congregation's graph. That's legal, since all of this is on the web. And everybody is welcome to go to the episcopalchurch.org website and view everybody else's graphs. However, we saved all the paper by not printing everybody's graph while giving you. Now, what are these numbers? The numbers on the graphs were supplied by you on your parochial report. That is due to the Episcopal Church once a year. And there is a fabulous statistical office of the Episcopal Church that actually reads and coordinates and provides these graphs of your parochial reports. So that's what those are. And some of your reports have some interesting things that you may say, oh my goodness, why does that go way up or way down? Chances are there was some revision that you reported to them. You got real about your membership number, for instance. But if you have any question about how to read the graph or what does X, Y, or Z mean, please see me or Bishop Hayashi, because we'll be happy to talk to you about what is the likely thing. The other thing I want to point out is your red bar, which is your average Sunday attendance number, is across the Episcopal Church usually about 1/3 of our membership reported. So if your red bar looks like it's in the neighborhood of 1/3 the length of your blue bar, your blue numbers are probably fairly accurate. If your blue bar is way over, you want to say, are we counting the right people and reporting them? Okay? So we can help you interpret these if you have any questions. And on the website, we'll be posting the information about how to find everybody else's bars. Okay, let's move on to my presentation called What is a Diocese and How is Ours Unique? There may be some real surprises in this for many people, not for others. But what is a diocese? It is simply a geographic, and that's important. In the Anglican Communion, real estate determines our boundaries in all but 2 cases. Okay? There's a prize at the end of, not really, but if anybody would like to name the 2, feel free. If you can, little contest here by the end of the afternoon. All but 2 places in the whole world, all dioceses are decided by geographic boundaries. And they're an administrative entity. Ancient Rome was divided into dioceses. It's a Greek word that the Romans used. But we know it as a bishop's jurisdiction. And if there's no bishop, there's no diocese. In fact, our canons are quite clear. We abhor a vacuum in a bishop. in a diocese that doesn't have a bishop. Excuse me. We abhor vacuums in bishops too. So, next slide. When the U.S. dioceses were formed, and I'm using U.S. because I'm speaking of the colonial church when we didn't yet have overseas dioceses as part of us. When U.S. dioceses were formed after the Revolutionary War, we made decisions to keep the English model, to keep the English ideal of having dioceses, bishops, priests, and deacons. That was up for grabs, but we decided to keep it. But we also decided we didn't want bishops like the bishops were in England, with quite a lot of power. And so dioceses in the U.S., in our Constitution of 1789, the same year the United States Constitution was written, in our Constitution we established standing committees, and in our canons we established vestries and diocesan conventions, and we included much more clergy involvement, clergy that weren't bishops, deacons and priests, and lay involvement in the decision-making. So many of the things that we do in the Episcopal Church and in Episcopal dioceses are unknown in other parts of the Anglican Communion or are just being discovered in other parts of the Communion. But mostly, a diocese is its people. In our prayer book, we learn that the ministers of the church are, first of all, the laity and the deacons, priests, and bishops. There are 4 orders of ministry. And so everything we have in our diocesan structure and all the administration we do is only for one purpose. It's to serve the work of ministry done by all the people of God. Now, the Diocese of Utah is very special. Now, we know that, but it's more special than perhaps we know. We have some obvious distinctions. The first is we are a small diocese. You heard Tyler speaking earlier of 160 plus congregations in the Diocese of Pennsylvania. We've got 24. Very few dioceses in the entire Episcopal Church are smaller than we are. Yes, there are. I counted 4 a while ago. We cover a vast geographical area. We have majestic landscape and unsettled areas. So that makes travel difficult, makes communication challenging, and just getting together like today challenging. We can't ask us to do this very often. Okay? Now, how are we unique? Our financial resources are just off the map compared to other dioceses. Our resources are perpetual and significant. We are among the richest dioceses in the Episcopal Church, and I'm talking the top 2 or 3. We are among the richest dioceses in the Episcopal Church per capita of membership. But our financial resources, as you've been hearing, are not owned by the diocese. They are owned by the Perpetual Trust of St. Peter and St. Paul. We don't control them. Now, with our resources, the diocese has been able to support its ministry in ways that other dioceses can only dream about. So, I'm going to name you some, but not all of the ways that the diocesan budget supports congregations that would be very strange in other dioceses. And those of you that come from other dioceses, I want to see those heads wagging when you are hearing some of this stuff. Grants from our diocesan budget to congregations are greater than any other diocese. and they have been sustained in a number of cases, in nearly all cases, over decades. Some dioceses give no grants whatsoever, not one penny. And some give only to their newest missions with the expectation the missions will become self-sufficient. The Diocese of Utah gives operating grants, as you heard in Tyler's presentation, to all of our mission congregations except one. Would the person who is here from that please stand up? Lois, and it's Priest Lee. Congratulations, Spirit of the Desert. Other grants, and this number is incorrect, it's a previous year. In 2018, the grants ranged from $10,000 to $138,000. Good heavens. $10,000 to $138,000. Other dioceses are jealous. Or maybe not. Let's go on and see. These grants are given to congregations, and they can support, you can use them for any line item in your operating budget. That's why they're called operating grants. Many people think what they are is a subsidy to your clergy salaries. They don't have to be. You could call them a grant to some other part of your budget. But the truth is, they probably make possible in many of our small congregations the support of a part-time or a full-time priest. Now, the congregational operating grants used to make possible the hiring of full-time clergy in all of our congregations. Bishop Bates, in his episcopate, when we had first received the monies from the sale of St. Mark's Hospital, had started a grand experiment. The experiment was to have lasted only 10 years, and it was to place a full-time seminary-educated priest in every congregation, with the hope that such an intensive investment in ordained ministry and leadership would quickly bring the congregations forward to self-sufficiency and greater growth. That has not been the case. In all other dioceses, this would have been impossible. No other diocese has ever done that. And in our diocese, the great experiment lasted way longer than 10 years and longer than 20 years. And it is no longer sustainable. Half of our congregations now have part-time clergy in charge. 10 years ago, every single congregation had a full-time priest. And we currently have 3 clergy, would you stand please, the 3 of you, who serve 2 congregations. Okay, and that's not easy. Would those of you stand who are part-time clergy, please? Okay, those who are part-time. Well, let me tell you something. They are really doing sacrificial ministry for the work of the church in this diocese, because every one of them would want me to say they may be paid part-time, but boy, they are giving much more of their time and talent to the work of ministry. So thank you all. Now, what does this mean? When we go to half of our clergy being half-time, that's got obvious consequences for the calling of clergy who will replace them. Those challenges will arise. Next slide. Our diocesan budget. Boy, this one should make you kind of scratch your head. Our diocesan budget is 93% funded by the grant from the Perpetual Trust, by the operating distribution we receive. In other words, we're living off a sugar daddy or a sugar mommy. 93% of our existence as a diocese is funded through the trust. And only 7% of our budget comes from the assessments that you make to the diocesan budget. Now here's the amazing thing. In all other dioceses of the Episcopal Church, it is literally just the reverse. In most other dioceses, 90 to 95% of income comes from assessments flowing from the congregations. Although some have enough investments, some of our older East Coast dioceses have enough investments to receive only 70 or 80% of their diocesan budget from their congregations. Now, let's take a look at our assessments. Next slide. The Diocese of Utah assessment to congregations is the following formula. We assess every congregation 7% of your net disposable income on the first $125,000, plus 10% of the amount between $125,000 and $250,000, plus 13% of any amount over $250,000. Okay. Other dioceses' assessments are way much higher than ours. They are generally ranging from, and this should say 15, not 5. That is an error. It should say 15% to 21%. Much higher than our diocese. And yes, other dioceses also assess their mission churches. That is normal. So congregational budgets in other dioceses have a greater buy-in to diocesan ministries, while our congregations keep more of your budgets at home for local ministry. Now, the $64,000 question. This is one I hear and all of us hear. Why not? Why shouldn't our diocesan financial good fortune in all of these ways be used in all of these ways with significant and long-term support for our congregation? Why not? If you've got the money, why not? Well, for one thing, over the time the trust has been in existence, it has given to the diocesan budget $130 million. We've spent all of that on ourselves. Okay? Some outreach, but mostly for simply being a diocese and operating our congregations. However, that has not resulted in any substantial growth across the diocese or in substantial greater self-sufficiency in our congregations. The Diocese of Utah staff carries out many tasks for our congregations, and this is yet another way that we are unusual as a diocese. We carry out an awful lot of operations for our congregations that would be done by the local congregation and its staff in other dioceses. For instance, in all but 2 or 3 congregations, we do the payroll for your congregations and all the human resource services, bringing your employees on board, terminating employees, doing the background checks for employees. My goodness, imagine if you had to do all your own payroll, your tax filings, and all your human resources out of your parish church office or your congregational office. We also administer health and other insurances. That's a huge amount of work to do the actual administration. I'm not talking about the money here. I'm talking about the paperwork for making those insurances happen. We offer, through our communications office and Craig Worth and Haley Oliver, an enormous amount of communications and internet consultation and administration. We administer a lot of your websites, and we help you design them and keep them current. That's quite a bit of time on the part of our staff. We do accounting and finance assistance with some of the congregations. We're always there to help you. And finally, and I know this because it just went in the mail, Steve Anderson spends a fair amount of time this time of year doing yearly legal filings that you have to file as nonprofit groups. So now, the Chancellor, on the next slide, another way that we provide services, the Chancellor and Vice Chancellors of our diocese provide extensive legal work to congregations. Here's an example. Such and such a congregation gets contacted by the local Department of Transportation because you own 10 feet of land on your property that they would like to have for a new road. Well, guess what? You need a lawyer to handle that. And so far, the diocesan chancellor has acted as your lawyer and gives you that service free of charge, paid by the diocesan budget. No other diocese provides this level of legal services, if any. And in all other dioceses, congregations themselves need to secure most legal services, either by hiring lawyers or by asking for pro bono lawyer work. Next slide. The Diocese of Utah, through Project Jubilee, paid off existing mortgages, we've heard about that, of all congregations that had them. There is no other diocese in the Episcopal Church whose churches are all mortgage-free. Not one. The absence of mortgages is a significant ongoing support to Utah congregational budgets. Now, continuing education. The diocesan budget supports clergy continuing education. By the way, it is a requirement in the canons that clergy take continuing education. Our diocese provides $600 a year through the diocesan budget to clergy with jobs, whether those jobs are paid or not, if you're assigned to a congregation by the bishop's assignment. And we provide up to $5,000 for a sabbatical to be matched, of course, each from the congregations. However, other dioceses either don't give any money at all for these, and a few other dioceses give a tiny little bit, but in almost every other diocese, the congregations themselves must fund the sabbaticals entirely. Now, I'd like you to think of your own congregation, think of your knowledge of its budget, its expenses, and I'd like you to imagine your congregational budget with the addition of the following. I'd like you to imagine that you are going to be paying your clergy health insurance, 80% of the premium. Currently, the diocese does that straight out of the diocesan budget. $500,000 a year. In other words, every congregation is an aided congregation in this diocese in this respect. No other diocese in the country does this. It's a significant amount of our budget. There are 2 other dioceses that give some support to clergy health insurance. In all others, the congregation or the employer of the clergy pays either 80 or 90 or 100% of the health insurance. So imagine if you were picking that up at, say, $13,000 for a cleric and a spouse. Imagine you had a mortgage payment of about $1,500 a month. And that would be small for some of our big churches. Imagine if you had legal bills of about $2,000 a year. It is not unusual for one of our congregations to run up much more than that with a particular legal issue that our chancellor has to handle. Or if he doesn't work in that area of law, we hire another lawyer to do it at our expense. Imagine if you had to take on all those expenses. Imagine needing to pay about $1,200 a year for the maintenance and development of your website and your electronic media. Imagine if you had to pay all of clergy continuing ed, and others say $600 on top of that, sabbatical of $5,000, and all sorts of other things, and you are quickly into a huge amount of money. Our congregations who are self-sustaining understand these challenges. Our smaller congregations understand challenges of a different kind in funding their ministries. For most of our congregations, it's simply impossible to imagine taking on all those expenses and sustaining our current level of ministry. But the reality is, congregations will need to begin to share in some of these expenses with the diocese. We will need to begin. First, the Diocesan Council, as you've heard, has already communicated to congregations, and that communication came in the letter that accompanied the announcement of your award, your congregational operating grant for this year. So last September, you received a letter from our Chief Financial Officer that included the information that it would be prudent for you to consider a 10% or more reduction in your grant should the council adopt that starting in 2019. Reductions will be decided for years following 2019 by each council then serving, because one council cannot bind the decisions of future councils. It is fair to say each congregation should begin to plan a step down of your operating grants. So what might that look like in addition? What might the future hold for all of us? First, it is possible parish churches, not missions, parish congregations, would be asked to pay a portion of the diocesan share of their clergy health insurance premium. If the diocese pays 80% now, the congregation might pay 10% and the diocese might pay 70% in year one, with an increasing share. And I said might because this is not yet decided by council, but you can count on taking on more of that 80%. Next slide. Another thing that the sharing in with congregations might look like, this is not yet decided, is that clergy who elect more expensive health plans, we offer a range of health plans, might be asked to fund the full amount of the difference themselves between the higher costing choice and the base choice. Currently, the diocese pays 80% of whatever plan the cleric chooses from among those offered. Okay, what else might the future hold as we look at congregational sharing in the budget? Congregations might be billed for certain legal services. Congregations might begin to do their own payroll or insurance administration. We're also very aware some congregations will find that easy to do, and others will find that very difficult to do given the resources of people in the congregation. But please note the final line on this slide. None of these things are yet decided. Okay, nothing is yet decided. Why not? Because council will not be setting the 2019 budget until it works over this summer and adopts it in September or October. Diocesan Council, which debates and adopts the diocesan budget, will consider all the options that address our large financial circumstances. They will begin to invite the Diocese of Utah into the best practices and the norms of the Episcopal Church. And our council will support the long-term health and growth and ministry of our congregations, because that's why we're here. So, all of us, all of this is so that we never lose sight of why we're here. Why are we doing all this? Why are we trying to be such careful stewards of these extraordinary resources that God has given to us in this place? We want to do the Lord's work in Utah and northeastern Arizona. We want to shepherd the resources we've been blessed with, and we want to exercise the ministries to which we are called and to which we are pledged in our baptismal vows. Let us never lose sight of those deep, deep reasons that all of these numbers matter, not only for us, but for the Episcopalians in the future of our diocese. Thank you.